Thank you and welcome. We're going to get started right away. I want to give you a few ground rules and tell you how this evening will work. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to introduce themselves. They'll describe what they believe would make them an effective council member, what issues they believe are most important to the city right now, and how long they've lived in Orange and if they are a homeowner. They'll have a various amount of time to answer the questions that will follow. Matt here, as you've already been introduced, will be the timekeeper, and when it comes to the questions, he will give a 15-minute warning. Following the opening remarks, we'll have those 15 questions of interest to all of the Orange voters, with an emphasis in this area of District 6. I'll let the candidates know myself how much time they have for each question. Following the 15 questions, we'll have a lightning round, and the candidates will ask quick questions, and they'll raise a little paddle like this, yes or no, and there'll be 6 questions in the lightning round. Following the lightning round, there'll be one final question, and we will conclude the forum with a 2-minute closing remark with final statements from each candidate. I want to also let all of you know that the questions tonight were submitted by our 3 sponsor groups, the Foothill Century, Orange Park Acres, and East Orange Citizens. So we're going to begin now, and we're going to start with the opening statements, 2 minutes. We're going to start alphabetically, and after the opening statement, we'll juggle the names so there won't be someone always first or always last. So we'll start alphabetically, and it's very unusual. We have 3 candidates whose last names are the first 8 letters of the alphabet. So we'll start with Adrienne, followed by Adrienne, followed by John, and then Brian. So Adrienne.
Do you want us to just talk here, or?
You could talk wherever you want. You can
okay.
Stand up, come here to the podium, stand out in front, any place.
Bring the mic to that.
Sure, yeah.
And speak a little louder, please.
But this is the first time someone ever told me to speak louder. Okay. Is this Brian? Just bring it over here like this? Okay. Okay, Adrienne, 2 minutes.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for hosting this forum, Foothill Century, Orange Park Acres, and East Orange Citizens. I'm Adrienne Gladson. I am candidate for District 6. I've lived in the district for 20 years and in Orange for 36 years. I own a small business, and I live near Santiago Creek, which is a theme that you're going to hear me talk about a lot tonight because it's critically important that we protect our creek. I earned a BA in geography and a BA in geography, a sociology minor from Cal State Fullerton, proud Titan. I have extensive community service in the community, from service to OPA. I'm a graduate of Leadership Orange, a number of other organizations, including Orange Rotary, PEO, GoCat. My big success, though, and my honor was serving as a planning commissioner appointed by the city council for 8 years and 4.5 years on the design review committee. That experience makes me uniquely qualified to serve all of you on the city council. I've also been part of CERT and just recently have been able to be part of the police academy, which I've been wanting to do for a good long time. I do want to share with you that my dad's badge is with me in my purse. My dad always wanted to be a law enforcement, and I brought him with me. I lost him in 2013. He was an Orange County Air Squadron Reserve, one of those pilots that flew around and looked for folks in an emergency. I'm running to bring balance and bring oversight to our city council with all of my experience. I'll tell you more about that as we go forward, but excited to be here and share with you my story.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for everyone for hosting. My name is John. I'm originally from the Midwest. I was born in Michigan. I moved 20 times in my life. My dad's a Marine. 6 years ago, I moved to East Orange. I've been married 15 years now, got married at 21 to my beautiful wife. I have 2 young kids, Caleb and Genevieve, that go to Orange schools. I am a regional director for Amazon. I've been in retail and operations management for the last 15 years, so I've had an awesome opportunity to lead large, successful organizations. And I chose to move to East Orange 6 years ago because I love this area. I love the open space. I love the parks. I run Peters Canyon. It used to be once a week. It's like once every 2 months now. But I really enjoyed and love this area. I've got to know my neighbors and the restaurants, and this is a place that I'm going to live the rest of my life. Why am I running for city council? I'm someone who likes to be an active participant. I like to be involved in things that are important to me. I was on the board of the United Ways of California. I was a regional community captain for a previous job. I partner with Feeding America at my current role at Amazon. I have been an assistant coach for my kids' sports, and I teach 3rd and 4th grade Sunday school at my church. Orange is a place that I love and I want to be involved in. I want to make sure Orange is a fun, a safe, and open place for my kids to grow up in. And that's ultimately why I've decided to run for city council. I also want to know what's important to people. So in the last couple of months, I've spent a lot of time knocking on hundreds of doors, and it's public safety, it's addressing homelessness, and it's protecting open space and parks. And all 3 of those things are very important to me. So looking forward to some additional time to get to know you all to get to know me. Appreciate the time.
Good evening. It's an honor and a pleasure to introduce myself and to ask for your vote. My name is Brian Harrington. I'm your neighbor. I'm a dad and a husband. I'm an engineer and a supply chain manager. I'm a soccer coach and a Little League coach. My wife and I chose Orange to be our home 8 years ago when we were ready to start our family. The promise and comfort of our city was unmatched then, and it's my mission to ensure that Orange will continue to thrive as our forever home. I want to see more parks, I want to see more trees, more bike lanes. Let's get doubly serious about our water resources and about our environment. Let's build a stronger, safer community of tolerance with sensible development and accessibility for all. Your city council has to work for you, in big things and small. When I was out gathering signatures, one neighbor asked me, "Will you be the person I can call about the neighbor who parks a dozen cars on their driveway?" Not to get into the right or wrong of that particular situation, but yes, let me say here and now, I will be the person you can call at City Hall. I will also be the person you can call on and count on when it comes to development. The solution to our housing shortage is simply more housing, but that doesn't mean housing everywhere and anywhere. Certainly not in a flood zone, and certainly not on properties where promises have been made and broken for decades. Development has to make sense. Any deals that are done have to have the support of the community. As a newcomer, 8 years, I don't know all of the history, but I'm a quick study and I'm an honest communicator. I'm Brian Harrington, and I humbly ask for your vote to represent City Council District 6. I look forward to some great conversations this evening. I'm delighted by the turnout. I look forward to meeting with you, and thank you most sincerely for this opportunity to give back to our city.
Okay, this first question, can everybody hear in the back? Okay, first question, 30 seconds. We're going to use the same order that we just did, Adrienne, John, and Ryan, and I will read the question to you. Crime and homelessness aside, what do you think is the biggest issue the city faces today? 30 seconds, Adrienne.
Well, after the first and second that you mentioned, the most important thing we need to do is restore trust at City Hall. Our current situation at the council, this particular community does not feel listened to. The last 4 or 5 years, we have watched a lot of inappropriate behavior at the city council meetings, directly naming individuals in this room as folks who were somehow wrong in having a love of their community and caring about things. So we need to fix that. That is what I'm going to do. Restore decorum and basically move forward in returning our city to us. That is my plan.
Besides public safety and addressing homelessness, I think the most important issue is building housing and protecting our open space and parks. For me, I will not vote for anything that would compromise open space or parks to allow for additional housing. I think as we look for how we grow as a city, I think it's important that we hold on to those spaces for our kids, and we look to develop, invest in those spaces so that there's additional recreational space for all of our families, and we don't lose that throughout the city.
Thank you. It's an interesting way that the question was posed, to put crime and homelessness aside. Those are clearly the top priorities for any person that I've spoken with. And you can't address homelessness without addressing the way we do development in the city today. We don't have enough housing, and we don't have enough services for homeless. And we need to provide more for the people in our community who are struggling and for the people in our community who are thriving.
Thank you. Second question, we'll start with we'll start with John, Brian, and then Adrienne. Here's the question. The mayor currently appoints members of city-sponsored commissions and committees, like the Planning Commission. Is this a best practice? If so, why? If not, what is a better alternative? You'll have 60 seconds. John?
I think it has been a best practice. The mayor has appointed members of commissions. As to should that be something that continues or should that be something that the council together decides, I'm open to that idea, and I think there is opportunity for individuals to weigh in to decide who's the best potential member of a commission out there.
Thank you. One of the interesting things about appointments is that oftentimes the community can feel that they're done in the back room, and I think that has to stop. Now, the other side of that coin is oftentimes they're not always volunteers who are interested in those positions. It's amazing that you see 3 candidates up here for this position, but when you get your voting ballot, I challenge you to find that there is not a position that has only one person running, and that's because someone didn't step up. And sometimes with these planning commissions and other appointed positions, there is no one choosing to volunteer. But I look out here and I see all the folks who are interested in our community, and I think that also might be a problem of outreach of the city council and how we reach out and communicate to our community that there is a position to be open. So I'd like to see positions being publicized more. I'd like to see the vetting process done in public and on the record.
It's my turn, I think, to answer.
Actually, no.
It is.
I have an answer.
I'm sorry.
The answer to the question is no. The current practice of how appointments have been done by our present mayor are woefully unfair and not consistent with what has been planning practice, what has been policy before the current mayor resumed office in 2018. I was on the Planning Commission for 8 years, and the process has clearly been a collaborative process. We have 2 members of our city council that do not have representation on the Planning Commission. We do not have a woman, and I will say that again, we do not have a woman on the Planning Commission. It does not reflect the demographic of our city, and that process needs to be reformed. It should be collaborative. The mayor obviously has the ability to make a final decision if that needs to be considered. The practice has been that 2 names would go forward and they would talk to the mayor and the council member would talk about that appointment. I have many individuals in mind, so that's what my plan would be in terms of what we address all of our commissions, including traffic, library, a number of them. So it needs to be fair, and I feel sorry that our community is not represented.
Okay, candidates, keep an eye on me if I try to pull that mic. I do apologize. Okay, third question. This will be 90 seconds. We will start with Brian, then Adrienne, and then John. The city's closure of Mary's Kitchen was controversial and generated a lot of negative feelings toward Orange. Could the city have handled that a different way? 90 seconds, Brian.
Thanks for that. There's a lot of people that disagree with how we help the people that need helping in our community. But I can't think of a worse outcome than to close a facility and then to take on that expense on the taxpayer, which is what happened when Mary's Kitchen was closed with no plan to provide those services. Could the city have found another place for Mary's Kitchen? I think it certainly could have. Is the new use of that area in keeping with the desires of the community where Mary's Kitchen may not have been? I think that's a very big open question considering what's going in there. The way it was handled did not feel like it was representative of our community or the best of us and the best of Orange.
Yeah, I do agree in concept with the discussion so far on that topic, but bottom line, the whole Mary's Kitchen situation was not handled at all well. And let me tell you why. There are individuals who are outside of our community that heard about that whole situation and are very embarrassed for how a operation that cost the city nothing, that actually operated for a very long time, had lots of support. I volunteered there many times over the years as an Orange Rotarian, brought food there, that this was essentially done without us giving input to it. Now, I'm not privy to what all the council knew in closed session, but it just didn't feel like Orange to me. It didn't feel like the community with the heart that cares about this particular issue. There is a project that's approved right next door for permanent supportive housing that went through the Planning Commission. It is a success, it should move forward. But again, I think we can all speculate on what happened, but it would be nice to know the truth. So that's my situation on all of that. It's unfortunate. I have, as I shared with you already, I have a lot of friends in the development world and in the service industry who asked me why it had to be this mean-spirited.
John's next.
Ah, John.
Thanks, Adrienne. I think whenever there is a reduction in services to support homelessness, it can feel bad and negative. I've had an opportunity to work in loss prevention in a former job for a regional role. And in that role, we as a company spent time investing in homeless services, but also spent time looking for ways to make sure that we protected our cities, our sites, and our stores. I think ultimately, when we look at addressing homelessness as an opportunity that we need to continue to address, we need to be looking at ways to fund our police. We need to be looking at ways to give additional funding to our HEART team. We need to look at longer-term solutions to help individuals make it back into mainstream society. Mary's Kitchen closing, I don't have all of the information behind that. I do know there was an increase in crime around that area. I do know in the city council we have to protect our residents. There has to be elements of enforcement, but at the same time we need to provide an empathetic approach to addressing the real people issues that come with being homeless. I think ultimately transparency in any decision at city council needs to be there. Could it be more transparent? Do I have all the information behind the decisions? I don't. But ultimately, we need to address homelessness with a balanced approach of enforcement, but at the same time, empathetic services.
Okay, the fourth question, we'll go back to our left to right, Adrienne, John, and Ryan. Number 4, this is 60 seconds. If you were elected to the city council, what would you change? 60 seconds, Adrienne.
What would I change? Well, first and foremost, what I would change is the culture of, as I shared earlier, change the culture of making it a outreach community, an outreach city hall, a people-based city hall where we all matter. And that's a culture shift, that's a mind shift. It means we would be educating all of Orange, the 148,000 of us approximately, how to engage, how to be part of the community, how to plug in on everything we want to do. I can tell you, having attended every council meeting, either in person or virtually during COVID, I have seen residents who have felt put upon because they showed up. We can't do that. We have folks who get interrupted when they don't know the process to talk in a microphone because they've never been there before. I want to change that. We need to be smiling and happy that you showed up, and if you call me and if you email me, I want to get back to you with solutions for your problem. So it's basically a switch. It's switching to community-based and thinking about how to help you engage in the process. Maybe I think we should be doing lots of study sessions on topics, on projects, on the budget, on issues of homelessness, on issues of the projects that are in the pipeline. We should be doing lots of education on this, and that's what I would change, and partnerships with all parts of our community.
I'm running for Orange City Council because I love so much about this city. There is so much that I would continue to preserve. There's fantastic traditions, events that I want to continue. I want to protect the open space that we have. I want to continue to fund our police, fund our fire department, who support us, especially in East Orange. As it pertains to city council meetings, I am very open to as much transparency as we possibly can get. I'm out knocking on doors. It's something I'm never going to stop doing. I want to continue to understand what's on everyone's mind. I would say I'm under no illusion that I have all the right answers. So what I want to know, and what I would probably add, is additional opportunities outside of the city council meeting to continue for me to reach out to individuals, to gather as much information, gather as much input as possible, so that everyone feels heard and everyone feels that they can contribute to the process, especially if they're coming and stepping into that space when they're speaking in front of everyone.
Thank you. So it's an interesting question. I mean, one of the first things that I would want to change is I would want each and every one of us who lives in the 6th district to know who they can call in City Hall and to be the advocate for the district. We have sort of had representation, but not really. If you tried to get a call about a park that wasn't getting cleaned up properly, or if you tried to make a call about some trash in the street, you might not have gotten an answer, and that has to change. That's the first thing that needs to change. The second thing, and only to echo what I think Adrienne said so well, is we need a city council that honors the members of our community, that honors the members of our community with a smile, that thanks you for coming in and being civically minded. I've certainly seen some of the horrible treatment of folks in the city council meetings, and that absolutely has to stop. That's not who we are. Thank you.
Question 5 will go with John, Brian, and then Adrienne. It's a 90-second question. Please describe how SB 9 will impact established neighborhoods in East Orange, District 6. 90 seconds, John.
Senate Bill 9 is in response to a housing supply demand imbalance, and the state has mandated additional opportunities for individuals to build duplexes, add ADUs, and ultimately allow for additional housing growth where we didn't otherwise see it. I am against mandates. I think government should be incentivizing individuals. But what we do have is we have a situation where we have state level mandates and opportunities for individuals to add additional units to their existing homes. Now there are restrictions in place, but ultimately it has streamlined the ability for people to do this. This is problematic if you have purchased in an area with a certain zoning regulation and that's what you want. This isn't something that I'm excited to have next door to me. But this is something that is out there. It's passed at the state level, and I think as a city, we need to be appropriately governing and regulating what this looks like in Orange. ultimately, it's not something that's we could change, but it's something that we can be paying close attention to and we can regulate so that it doesn't get out of control in Orange.
Thanks. What's interesting about SV9 and the other bills that come down from Sacramento, and even if there's some questions about some of the things passed in Washington, is we've got to find a solution that works for Orange. The reality of the situation is the government in Sacramento can pass rules and laws that we have to find a way to live with here in Orange. And we can lobby collaboratively to our state senators and our state assembly representatives. But one of the things that's also interesting, and one of the reasons why I'm here, one of the inspirations for me to come up and run is, he's a polarizing figure, but our governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's been out of office for some time, and he writes a heck of a newsletter, if you've ever seen it. And one of the things he had in his most recent newsletter was, look, we're a country that builds things. We are a country that gets things done. We are a city that gets things done. We are a city that builds things. The solutions to our problems, whether it's homelessness or housing, some of the challenges of the environment, the solution is not by going back and sitting on our hands. It's by actually getting up and doing something. I think we can do some things with SV9 that are really exciting. I'm not excited about my neighbor building an ADU, that overlooks my backyard, but I'm sure I could find a way to live with it.
Well, SB9 is a disaster.
Yes.
SB9 essentially eliminates all subdivision regulations on lot size. And for those of us that love the rural atmosphere of East Orange, the 1 acre lots, the mandates of our general plan, it would allow for lot sizes to be as small as 1,800, 1,200 square feet. That's a disaster for the unique neighborhoods of all of District 6, as well as Orange. Now, historic districts are exempt by the state legislation, but this is not all driven by Sacramento. This is investors, this is .com, this is Wall Street. This is the industry that wants to get your property and wants to buy your land, and they're gonna go where they can get the land first and come in, tear down a house, and put up 3. So this is investors who went up and lobbied Sacramento and certain people and asked them to do this. It's a pretense. It doesn't deliver very affordable units. It doesn't deliver anything other than homes that are going to be just as expensive as the market requires. So the reality is I'm very supportive of Livable California, and they've got a lawsuit pending on this legislation. We have to fight it. We missed the boat and not being at the table and advocating. I will tell you, our delegation, our Sacramento delegation was very much opposed to this, but we do have to keep fighting that.
Question 6 is a long one, and it's 2 parts. You'll have 90 seconds. We'll start with Ryan, Adrienne, and then John. In the last 20 years, the city of Orange has faced numerous land use lawsuits and 3 successful referendums that ultimately overturned discretionary actions made by the Orange City Council. Not only has this wasted taxpayer money and staff time on projects rejected by the public, but citizens were also forced to spend countless hours getting signatures to place these land use issues on the ballot. Here are the 2 parts. Do you intend to continue the practice of ignoring public opinion? And how would you do it?
Exactly.
You have 90 seconds.
What was the second question?
part?
What was the second part? I'm sorry.
Oh, I ran together. First part, do you intend to continue the practice of ignoring public opinion? That's part 1. Second part, how would you do it differently? All right?
Okay.
Okay. Ryan, it's yours.
Yeah. So thanks for this. I really appreciate this question. Would I continue the practice of ignoring public opinion? Absolutely not. That's one of the biggest challenges of Orange, and that's of course one of the reasons why I think all 3 of us are up here, is because we do have a city hall that currently gets away with a lot of stuff and locks us out, and that has to change. Now, how would I do it differently? Well, one of the things is you got to listen. When the community says we don't want X, Y, or Z in this plot of land or that area or that spot, you gotta listen. Now there's opportunity for compromise, but you've gotta come to that table with honesty. You can't come to that table with a set agenda where you're gonna insist on what you want. Like when my 8-year-old daughter wants to wear her Disney dress to school, and that's just not allowed under the school rules. So she negotiates by digging her heels in and jumping up and down. That's not how adults do it. We come to the table with our different positions. If we can find a way to make compromise, we do. If we can't make compromise at that time, we come back at another time. We do it with a smile, we do it as friends, we do it as neighbors. And that, I think, is something that absolutely has to change in Orange. But certainly, spending taxpayer money to do things that the taxpayers are not in support of makes absolutely no sense and has to stop.
Well, I would not ignore public opinion. I'm surprised that it's taken 3 times for that to basically get through a couple of thick skulls. The first referendum with Fieldstone in 2002 should have been enough. Our community has made it quite clear consistently, and also with Measure AA, which I collected signatures for that. My team got almost 400, and I was vigilant in getting that particular measure defeated. But we just have to stop playing this game. We don't need lawsuits. It's a waste of time. As a former staff member, our staff should be doing their work and not get dragged into political gamesmanship and paybacks and whatever but goes on behind the scene because there was a lawsuit previously in another lawsuit. We have the right to object when we think our council makes the wrong decision. And what I would do differently is stop playing this game and start being leaders, start following up with what our general plan says. That's the bottom line. That's our roadmap. Our community knows what's expected here. Open space land should be open space land. And in my opinion, what I would also do differently once I get on the council is we can take some urgency steps. We can do some moratorium on things, particularly the RA designation in our general plan. It's obsolete. It's time for it to go. So we can move forward on that and get this stopped immediately.
You don't want me to speak
No,
here.
I keep forgetting.
Yeah, okay. I am on the council to listen and serve the residents of Orange. Absolutely, we need to listen to the residents of Orange. As it pertains to any development or any potential zone change, all residents need to be brought into any potential discussion early, and their voice needs to be heard as the loudest voice in the room. There could be opportunity, and I would never vote for open space to be developed on in other areas of the city. But in those cases, residents need to be a part of the discussion, and they need to be thinking through any of those opportunities in terms of what the potential fit could be. As it relates to Sully Miller needs to remain open space. I would support open space, and I would, on the council, I'll be looking for ways to preserve it as open space, get it to acquire this land, find federal, state, local grant money, or work with any other public organization where we can keep Sully Miller as open space. That's what I want. This would be a fantastic place for my kids to grow up and be able to use for years to come.
Okay, question number 7 will go left to right, 90 seconds. In 2019, citizens collected enough signatures to qualify the referendum that would stop the Santiago Creek development. The measure was put on the 2020 ballot entitled Measure AA. Did you support or oppose Measure AA? Why did you take the public position on the issue? So 3 questions. Did you support or oppose it? Why? And did you take a public position on the issue? 90 seconds, Adrienne.
Well, I've kind of already answered the question. Yes, I was opposed to Measure AA. I was publicly opposed to Measure AA. It's really it's a test case of what not to do when it comes to a land use change and a planning process. And I'll tee off of something my colleague here, or the candidate mentioned, the community wasn't engaged in that project at all. It was a whole shell game in many ways. So my opposition to it, and I will explain this to you a little bit planner-like, because I'm a planner and a member of the, previously a planning commissioner. I looked at the environmental aspect of the project first and foremost. That's where I always start. If the CEQA document, if the environmental document is flawed, and it was clear to me, because I looked at the previous project for this site called Rio Santiago on the Planning Commission, that nothing had changed. The data was old and stale. We had an inadequate EIR. So I can't approve something as a council member when I have a deficient, inadequate EIR. So the project was dead on arrival. And the reality is, and I mentioned this earlier, I was in the council chamber in September and October of 2019, and I watched what was said about those who were in opposition to the project, and it was not what we were saying happens in our city. There was not polite decorum. There was really inappropriate stuff, and the community was blamed for the denial. That should never happen on our council dais. There you go.
I voted yes on the measure. Based off of the information that I had, I saw an opportunity to clean up a gravel site and an eyesore, and with an opportunity to get some open space from the actual measure. Looking back on it, I always wanted open space for that. Not knowing the inside or the detailed part of this, I always would want that to be open space, but I saw as an opportunity to clean up that space. Going forward for me, Sully Miller will stay open space. I will do everything. I think it'll be the top issue for me as we look to retain it as recreational space for us going forward.
Yeah, was it proposition? Whatever it was, Measure AA was one of those things that makes you really wonder who's running the show. The developer had lost at the Planning Commission, the developer had lost at the community, and the developer just decided to throw a ballot measure on the ballot and hope that we didn't pay attention to how it was written. The developer then tried to get part of the community to work against the other part of the community to support this thing. And I'm glad it didn't go through, because it was poorly worded. It was giving favor to one developer who has not treated this community as anything other than a landfill, which he's not permitted to do, and he has been doing across the street for goodness knows how long, and goodness knows what's there. It should be cleaned up, and he should be paying for it.
Okay, question 8, 90 seconds. We'll start with John, Brian, and then Adrienne. Is there a city council decision over the last few years that you strongly disagree with, and how would you have handled it differently? 90 seconds, starting with John.
I think the decision to move forward with development on a few projects, specifically with the Sully Miller site, I disagree with that decision. And the reason why I disagree with that decision is because there was an open and consistent dialogue going on where it was clear that many residents were very invested in further discussions, and I don't think an agreement was reached. I think ultimately, if there's any decisions that are going to be made on anything related to rezoning or development, pushing forward without some level of agreement or understanding is not the right approach to take. I think it ends up resulting in what we've seen, and I think that is additional money spent in referendums that we wouldn't otherwise have to do unless we get to a point where we have some level of agreement on these decisions to move forward.
Yeah, I'm going to forget the specifics of it right now. Certainly the Sully Miller situation and other zoning matters that have come to the city have been really questionable as a resident and a homeowner. I've also seen appointments that have been made that you really wish you were in the room when that decision was made. I'm blanking on it right now, and I'm sorry to do that, but certainly when our city converted to a district operation, we had already voted for term limits, and somehow a city council member who had already exceeded his term limits was on the ballot again, and the city attorney signed off on it. And immediately after that, immediately after he was elected, there were how many lawsuits about it? That is just turning a deaf ear to the community, and that's not what we're here to do. The community voted for term limits. Whether you agree with it or not, the community voted for it. That's what's in our city statutes. And somehow, through some Byzantine process, a justification was made because the actual district that the gentleman was running in had changed the name. That's dirty pool to me. Thank you.
Actually, the decision that I find most disappointing, that if I had been on the council that I would have raised a red flag, was our city attorney making a decision that allowed Milan to put all the material on the property after the denial of Rio Santiago in 2014. We gave them a green light without any oversight by the city. We relied on them doing something which we now are trying to unravel, and all of the mess that's over on that property, we didn't stop. And that's the fundamental thing that I think we should have stopped way back then. And it turns out that we now know that this is a landfill. It's a toxic landfill. It's not what they intended. They didn't know what they were doing. The developer, the applicant, and their team. That is a regretful decision that should have never been made. Obviously, this project is a huge mistake that this district's going to have to face as we figure out a cleanup of it, which is Milan's responsibility. So I was clearly involved and invested in the community and going to council meetings during that time frame, but I wasn't on the council. And believe me, I would have raised a lot of red flags if I'd been there.
Question 9, we will start with Brian, go to Adrienne, and then John. And 90 seconds. Homeowners have an expectation that zoning in their neighborhoods will remain as it was when they purchased their homes. Developers buy land with an expectation that zoning will be changed to support their project. What is your position on zoning changes? 90 seconds, starting with Brian.
Yeah, zoning changes are definitely a hot button. If there's anything to be considered, it needs to be done in collaboration with the community. And I would even extend it beyond zoning. When we bought our home, we had a neighborhood where the streetlights were, roughly 10, 12 feet above the ground. It was a lovely area where you could walk in the evenings. The city came in and replaced those, what I would call pedestrian scale lighting, with the lightings that you see on the side of the freeway, 25 foot high, right in my daughter's window on the second floor of our house. There was no outreach to the community about that change. Now, I'm sure it saved a few dollars here and there on maintenance or potentially on electricity. But why wasn't the community communicated to about this? It was just, guess what? Now you have a neighborhood where walking around at night is not as comfortable as it was before. Did the mic drop out? Yep. Okay, battery's dead. So anyway, zoning in the neighborhood, if there are zoning changes to be made, it needs to be addressed in a meeting like this with the community, with everyone together, and the case needs to be made, and it needs to be done collaboratively with the ear to the community, not a decision made in the back room.
I'm going to stand up on this one just so you can hear me in the back. But let's back up and be really correct. A zone change first starts with a general plan amendment. You have to change the general plan before you can change the zoning. So if a developer wants to come in and change the general plan to high density, industrial, commercial, whatever, they have to start there, and then the zoning comes forward. So the first thing you have to do is convince the council that you want to make a legislative change in your general plan. Your general plan should be predictable. It should be assuring that when you buy a piece of property, that what's next to you is what you're going to get in the future. So that's the piece that we need to fix, because what we've been doing is kind of playing games on the backside and saying we can change zoning, and we don't change zoning until we change the general plan. And that's essentially what's been going along across the street. And here's the piece. I wrote an op-ed about this topic in 2018 for the Foothill Century. Go look it up, go look at the Century and read it. A general plan amendment is not an obligation that your council has to do. They don't have to give it to you if you're a developer. You can simply say no. And in my opinion, unless a project has merit, we should say no. I guess just go ahead, John, you can. Our poor mic is broken.
I'll stand up as well.
Battery's dead.
So I think with any zoning change, or any plan underlay, it is important that the community comes in and is a part of the discussion right at the beginning of this. At the end of the day, we will grow as a city. There will be opportunity for us to look at certain parts of our city and find uses that are more viable in our current time than maybe 40 or 50 years ago. But if somebody buys a piece of property and it's zoned a specific area, they don't have a right to switch that zoning. That's a zoning that needs to be spoken for and agreed upon by all of the residents that have purchased property around there. I would never be for any zoning change that doesn't fit the area or doesn't fit the plan or is not agreed upon by the residents around there. Putting single family residents by ultra high density housing doesn't make sense, it doesn't fit. But any potential adjustment to any zoning has to be done with the residents that live around there agreeing to what it should and could look like. And anybody who buys land buys it for its current zoning and is not entitled to change that zoning ultimately.
Okay, question number 10, we'll go back to left to right. Fire is a huge issue in East Orange. The Canyon 2 fire in 2017 caught many people by surprise. Evacuation was made worse by routing traffic from Anaheim Hills down Canyon to Santiago Canyon Road when the 241 was closed. It created a bottleneck for East Orange evacuees. How would you address this issue? 90 seconds, beginning with Adrienne.
Well, bottom line is we sit down and we come up with a workable plan so what happened with the last fire doesn't happen again. Our evacuation plan wasn't really in place, and we had different agencies not knowing exactly what to do. We know wildland fires are a very high risk for out here, but they can actually happen anywhere. Even while I'm a little bit west of you, I watched that fire and I was worried about embers coming into my roof. So we have to plan better, and we have to practice, and probably practice a bunch of times. And then coordinate. We have lots of pieces that we can do here in OPA and all the surrounding areas. So that's probably the best thing we could do, is be prepared for how we're going to move large animals and what we do. Because I'm going to show up and help, and I want to be told, do this, Adrienne, take this there, and I'm ready to go. That's one of the big things that we're going to have to be prepared for. I pray to God it's not this fall as we get into the Santa Anas. This morning, I'll finish with this. I was part of the fire chief speaking to us. I asked him a question about how we're dealing with enforcement. out here, particularly clearing brush. So that's a big part of making sure that brush is cleared in all these high fire zones and protecting the residents that live out here.
So I bought my home in 2016. I live in Cowan Hills, and the fire burned Peters Canyon up to the border of my home. I was evacuated by OCPD with a blowhorn, leave your house now, as I was hosing my house down. As I was driving out of my neighborhood to go down Newport, there were 6 firefighters on Newport fighting the fire in Peters Canyon so it wouldn't come into my neighborhood. So I think first off, we need to look at what our fire department needs. And right now they're asking for a 4-person crew for their trucks. And that will allow them to bring additional EMT responders and the right resources that they need to do their job. So I think we need to be able to fund and give our fire department what they need. Secondly, the fire department has gone through a few different iterations of what they would do if this was to happen again. And there is content online that we can all look at to make sure we're prepared if it was to happen again, God forbid. And then ultimately, generally speaking, we need to continue to look at ways to mitigate. We know in East Orange there's the potential for fires, especially during droughts, and our fire department is looking for those additional ways from a brush clearance standpoint.
It's interesting, there was a comment made in a recent city council meeting about the Sully Miller property, and I think someone on the council said something along the lines of, it's not our property, so we can't do anything about it. And it's interesting that we're talking about fire, because if that property was on fire, who'd be putting it out? It'd be Orange City Fire Department, it'd be Orange County Fire Authority. We'd probably call in help from Anaheim to help us out with that area. The fact of the matter is we live in a fire zone, we live in a drying climate. It was, I want to say it was 2, maybe 3 years ago. We woke up in my neighborhood. I live over by Santiago Middle School, very near the Orange County Water District reservoirs next to Hughes between Bond and Villa Park Boulevard. And the reservoirs had been emptied, and they had been emptied to perform some maintenance work. And the way it was communicated had to do with wildlife downstream, which was certainly very important, but I saw that as that's what puts out the fires in our neighborhood if we have one. Because I've seen, and I'm sure other folks have seen, the CAL FIRE helicopters loading up their buckets with the water to go drop on the fire when we had the fire in our area. One thing I will say that the fire department absolutely needs more support on is interoperability with the other agencies that are around. We have, goodness knows, 25 fire agencies within a few miles of here. And the interoperability question and the alignment of plans is why we had the poor alignment of plans is why we had the traffic snafu when folks were evacuated.
Well, we have a contraption here. Can you hear me back there? Any better?
No.
I'm sorry, Pastor.
Maybe, that works. Maybe, that
Hello?
works.
Hello?
Now talk.
How about now? All right. I think we got it. We need to give a round of applause to the pastor here. He said he's not a tech guy, but I think he does more than being a tech guy. So thank you, Pastor. Okay, question 11 is a 2-part question. We're going to have you answer the first part, 60 seconds, and then the second part will be 30 seconds. Very simple. What is the general plan? 60 seconds, we'll start with John, go to Brian, and then Adrienne.
The general plan is the existing zoning for all aspects of the city. So initially, when the city planning was done, there was a zoning that was set aside for all elements of the city. So if you look at that general plan, it lays across Orange and will identify if areas are commercial, single family, resource, open space, etc. Over time, plan underlays, overlays, or adjustments to the general plan allow for different types of buildings to occur in light of that general plan. But the general plan is the overarching plan for zoning for the city.
What was the second part of the question?
We haven't gotten there yet.
Oh, we haven't gotten there yet. Okay. My understanding is similar, but I'm going to be completely frank. I am not a city planner. I certainly don't have Adrienne's experience in this area, but what John described is also my understanding. It's the basic guideline for how our city is going to be laid out, what areas are going to be heavily commercial, what areas are ideal for positioning a hospital. Very proud of the hospitals we have here in Orange. What areas are going to be for residential, what areas are going to be for commercial operations. That's my understanding as well, but I'm not an expert in this area at all.
Well, the general plan is simply our Constitution. It is the policy document that every decision the city council makes streams from, whether it's our budget, whether it's how we deal with public safety for police and fire, all the land use issues, open space, parks, libraries. It is our Constitution. Think of it as the Constitution of the United States of America. It is our Bible. It is the direction and vision for everything that we do in Orange. There isn't a staff report, there isn't a recommendation that comes from staff without tying it to a goal, policy, or priority, or plan in the general plan. The housing element's also there. There are 7 mandatory requirements by state law, and it should be updated every 10 years. Ours is overdue. We reviewed it and updated when I was on the Planning Commission in 2010, and thank you.
Okay, hold the mic there.
Oh.
We're gonna go with Brian, Adrienne, and John. Just 30 seconds.
Part
Simple
2.
question. Do you believe it should be followed?
Do I believe that the Constitution of the City of Orange be followed as described by Adrienne?
Do you believe it should be followed? The second part.
The general plan.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the basic law of our city, of course we should be following it. Now, if one of the elements is that it be revised every 10 years and it hasn't been, we're overdue and we need to get that done. Who's next? John?
Back to me?
Okay.
It's Adrienne.
Yes, the same, I think it should be followed.
I'm a constitutionalist, so I believe it should be followed. I think every 10 years revision is in the books, then it should be revised based off of that time frame, but I think it should be followed.
Okay, this is a 30-second question, number 12. We'll start with Adrienne, John, and Brian. Orange Park Acres is celebrating 94 years. Would you support a historic designation to protect the rural character of Orange Park Acres, and why? Starting with Adrienne, 30 seconds.
Yes, because it's been adopted already with a specific plan that this community put together back in the 1920s. Yes, it should be historically designated. It's also been the goal of achieving all the projects that this particular neighborhood these neighborhoods here have fought so hard for. So yes.
I would say yes. Orange Park Acres is an institution to East Orange. It's a place that when I moved here I wanted to get in. And I think ultimately it should be continued to be preserved going forward. This is a neighborhood. This is a neighborhood that is open, and there's a huge amount of recreation and enjoyment around this neighborhood. So I would say yes.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. If you look on the maps over here, there's a portion, and it's a very sensitive topic, I know, especially because of horse manure removal, but there's a section of Orange Park Acres that is certainly not part of the jurisdiction of the city. Talking about the portion that is part of the city, I would completely agree that historic community designation is appropriate.
Okay, question number 13. It's a 2-part question, but I will have you answer both parts. together rather than separately. We'll go with John, Brian, and Adrienne, 90 seconds. Are you familiar with, have you read the Orange Park Acres Specific Plan, East Orange Plan, and Santiago Creek Greenbelt Plan? Why do these plans matter? 90 seconds, starting with John.
I have read the plans, the specific plans, and the reason why they matter is they converge on the Sully Miller site, and they represent different visions for each respective specific area. The Orange Park Acre Plan comes into the east side of the Sully Miller area. The other plans take up the other portion of Sully Miller site. I think this is why the discussion around that site is so important. These plans converging on Sully Miller has created an open dialogue that I think has been able to be resolved. And ultimately, Sully Miller needs to be open space. That's what we need to do. It's what we need to make happen. That we need to find the funding to acquire this space and preserve it. But ultimately, I am aware of the specific plans, and I think the importance lies in protecting the existing character of each of the neighborhoods, and I think it becomes even more important because it converges on the Sully Miller site.
Yeah, it's interesting to talk about the basic ground rules of decorum, and that's what these plans are. And anything that's proposed needs to follow these plans or go through the appropriate process for adjusting these plans if there's community support for those adjustments. Yet we have, it's hard to say it any other way, we have a city council that sees the plans as something as an inconvenience that should be abrogated and avoided and worked around. And that's not what we're here for. We're here to do things to make our community stronger, to make our community better, and make it the forever home that we all want it to be.
Well, we're talking about a topic that means a lot to me because I mentioned in my opening, the Santiago Creek is the connector of all of Orange. All the districts that we have touch it except one, which is District 3. And yes, I've read the East Orange General Plan, the specific plan for OPA, and the Greenbelt Plan, which is the tool that helped us connect the creek with trails and connectivity all the way to Santa Ana. And when I moved to Orange and bought my first place, I bought a place in Morningside on the lake, which is at the perimeter, at the edge, the southern edges of the creek. We have a natural resource that is all covered in these documents, and I know we've talked about general plans a little bit, but they all nest into your general plan and they have to be consistent. So the Orange Park Acre Specific Plan has always identified the Sully Miller site, the property at the corner of Cannon and Santiago Canyon Road as open space. And the Greenbelt Plan gives you the tools to how to do all these pieces together. All of them are critically important, and you have to understand each one of them to make a decision about any land use there. I looked through them all specifically with the Rio Santiago project in 2014 on the Planning Commission, the East Orange General Plan, which was adopted back as well. So it's critically important that we do this stuff correctly.
Okay, question 14, we'll start with Brian, go to Adrienne, and then John, 90 seconds. Orange has a deficit of recreational open space, yet the city continues to upzone areas for housing. How do you reconcile that? 90 seconds, Brian.
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. We, especially here in District 6, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm fairly confident we have the least number of parks and the least amount of acreage of parks of any district in the city. Now, we benefit from having large lots, but we still want to see some parks. Even the parks that we have, I would say, are not as well maintained as they certainly could be. Upzoning open space for more housing without providing space for recreation, without providing pools, without providing sports fields. I think John and I are both heavily involved in youth sports. And I can tell you that the facilities that we have in this city should be world-class, and a lot of them are not. And the ones that are in great shape because there's a community organization that's paying to do it, not the city that's paying to do it. I don't see how we can have a community without parks, and I think we should have many more parks, and the open space that we have, and even the undeveloped open space that we have, needs to be made much more accessible to our residents.
Well, we do have a serious deficit in open space. Our general plan identifies, per the Quimby Act by state law, that even if we acquired about 264 acres, we'd have 3 acres per thousand, which is not the minimum that the state recommends, which is 5 acres per thousand people. So we really need somewhere around 600 acres. So bottom line, I've been talking about open space deficit for the last 4 years, and it's finally getting traction because we see what happened with the latest discussions with the council. We just made bad planning decisions. We basically didn't require parks to be dedicated and built when we built the housing that's now on the ground. That's the bottom line. We didn't plan for it and we didn't make it happen. If you make a short-term decision and you let a developer off the hook, you're gonna be having to pay catch-up all along. So sadly, I'm saying we in terms of the prior council and members of our council who are there now, were part of those decisions made poor planning decisions to trade open space for upzoning and developing property. And even the North Tustin Pacific Plan, which is now on halt, had no plans for open space in it. Now, how can that be? So it's leadership, it's a vision, a commitment to open space.
I run Peters Canyon once a week. In the COVID, I used to take my kid to Santiago Hills Park almost daily. I play softball at Hart Park. I play basketball at Grijalva. We need to protect, we need to preserve the open space that we have, and we need to fund these spaces so that they continue to be areas that are maintained and high recreation for us and for our kids. Why is it threatened? I think it's threatened because there are many forces that are we have a RENA regulation, we have housing requirements that are being pushed into cities. That doesn't mean we need to build on these open spaces. We need to protect our open spaces, we need to hold on to our parks. A city is great because of that space and that ability to have that open opportunity to go outside and have recreation with your family. And that's something that we can't give up. It's something that we need to continue to preserve. But ultimately, these decisions are being made, I think, with a focus on additional housing. We can't let it happen.
Take the mic. Question 15 is a long one. We'll go back to our original order, left to right, Adrienne, John, and Brian, and it will be the last question in this round. Over the years, Orange Park Acres has established over 25 miles of multi-use trails, which connect to our regional park system with limited financial support from the city of Orange. Currently, the OPA Trail Committee is working on the Community of Orange Loop Trail, COLT for short, which is a 10.5-mile loop trail that would connect the 4 regional parks in East Orange. The vision includes a bridge to safely cross Chapman Avenue. We believe this loop trail enhances the East Orange experience. If you are elected to the City Council, what could you do to help us achieve our goals?
Find funding to do it. That's the bottom line. The Cold Trail in particular is a top priority in all our trails here in OPA, which are managed by individuals, which is remarkable. I don't know another community that has that amenity in place. So my efforts will be on the council to find funding for that project, as well as all the other things that we're gonna need to fix related to open space, both the Sully Miller site as well as other sites in the city. And let me share with you, this is not something that we haven't identified previously. It's the political will to get it done. And that's my commitment, to fight for that and be open about what we got to accomplish to get these things done. The loop trail and all those connections are a great amenity that tie also to the creek and back to the Greenbelt plan. So it's, again, comprehensive. It's just we got to go after the funding.
This one is very close to home. As I was talking about running for city council, my wife is a PhD. She does diabetes research, and she spends a lot of time with youth in healthy food choices and having an active lifestyle when they're younger. So one of the biggest things she's been sharing with me is how can we improve trails? How can we connect trails? So I think this is a big issue, and I think it's something that I think could do a lot of good for the community. I think in order to do that, it takes money. I've been spending time looking for various funding ways to address Sully Miller, and as I've been looking, there's federal funding, there's state funding, there's organizational funding, there's a lot of grants out there that other cities, other organizations have tapped into that this could apply to. So I think the city having resources to look into grant funding and finding ways to pay for something like this, I think it would be valuable. I think it would be something I would use. I know my wife would use it, but I do think it's something we should be looking at and looking for funding to see how we can make happen.
Yeah, fully support the project, at least as I've been able to learn about it. You know, we talk about funding, but we also talk about priorities. And it should be an obvious thing for every person who lives in Orange that parks and improving our environment and providing things like the trail that we're talking about is a priority for this city. I think if we asked residents or even residents here, are parks a priority for our city, or is something else a priority? And it's very clear to me that our priorities are not appropriate, and funding always flows from priorities. You know, the neighborhood that I live in is pretty nice, as I think all of our communities are. And a few years ago, everything was repaved. It didn't need to be repaved. The streets they weren't in crystal perfection, but they were good enough. And they weren't potholes. There wasn't damage, but it was repaved. Why does the city have a priority for that and the funding for that? But then when we talk about a trail like this that could make our community so much more vibrant, there isn't funding, and the city's going to sit on its hands. You know, I think our priorities are just not right, and I think it's important that we get them right, and I'm going to do my best to get them right.
That concludes the 15 questions. We're going to go to the second part of our forum, and that is called the lightning round. And each of the candidates has a paddle in front of them. One of them says yes, the other one says no. I will be asking 6 questions, of which the final one is a 2-parter. And they will just hold up the paddle, and then we will go on to the next question. So, question number 1. A sitting council member recently stated that Orange, quote, survives on development, end quote. Do you agree with that? Yes or no? Thank you. Number 2, will you accept campaign donations from developers and their various lobbyists and consultants? Yes or no? Okay. Number 3, city offices are nonpartisan, but most of us do have a party affiliation. Do the goals of your political party influence you when making city decisions? Yes or no? Number 4, would you support a code of conduct for council members? Okay. Number 5, residents are Chandler site near the corner of Cannon and Santiago Canyon Road. Chandler wants to fill in this area, but hasn't explained why. The site has been reclaimed by nature and is not zoned for houses. Santiago Creek flows through it. Should an environmental impact report be required? Okay. And number 6, this is the two-parter. East Orange residents have been complaining for years about the former Sully Miller site. City Hall has ignored the residents as the mounds grew higher. Finally, in 2020, the County Local Enforcement Agency, LEA, responded to a citizen complaint and discovered the landowner has been operating an unpermitted disposal site. According to sworn testimony, there are no records of what has been dumped on the site since 2013. Part 1, should the City Council have used its enforcement authority to stop the illegal activities? Part 2, should Milan, the landowner of the former Sully Miller site, be required to clean up the entire 109-acre site? Okay, thank you. That ends the lightning round. We have one final question before we go into closing statements. The order will be John, Brian, and Adrienne, and then the closing statements will go to Brian, John, and Adrienne. So, final question. If you were elected, how would you move the cleanup on the former Sully Miller site forward? 90 seconds, beginning with John.
The lead enforcement agency, or the LEA, has an agreement with the owners of the Sully Miller project to clean up the site, ultimately to go through the mounds of whatever is on there, and to go through those mounds and to look for anything that could be hazardous within those mounds. So ultimately, we need a third-party agency to be able to go through there and validate that that area is cleaned. And as they go through that entire plot of land, that agency needs to go through each mound to make sure there's no hazardous material or anything that is there. If there is, then the owners of the Sully Miller site need to clean it up. They need to mitigate anything that's there, and they need to restore the land back to its overall state.
Yeah, it's time the city take advantage of its position as a party to this property. As was mentioned, there's record of illegal dumping. Where's the injunction? Where's the lawsuit on Milan? Who is holding that company to account for what they've done with that property? So the first thing, of course, is to hold them to account. If they've violated the law, if they've broken the law, if they've polluted our water, if they've polluted our area, let's hold them to account. Let's get the courts to do things for our community instead of the other way around. We've had far too much of the community, of the city council, trying to push things through and do who knows what with that land. We know that it has not been managed well, and it's time that we take action as a community against this developer who has treated us as a landfill.
Well, first of all, the order that Milan and LEA has issued is in dispute on how much of the land that Milan is agreeing to test. So that in the first situation, John, is inappropriate because Milan doesn't think they should test the entire site. And they've had a full reign of actually putting materials on this site, and they don't want to test beyond a certain scope of the property. So that needs to be addressed, and they need to step up, test the entire property, and find out what's there, because they don't think there's hazardous material here. So that's the problem. We need to get that done. Our council needs to get in the game too. We do need a third-party mitigator, an oversight person to watch all of this carefully. I think the city has a role in terms of the cleanup, but we need to hold Milan accountable for the cleanup. And I will also share, there's two confusing messages. We have a council member that told us at the last meeting that Milan would never clean it up.
15 seconds.
And then just a week ago, the city manager shared with us that Milan intends to develop the site. So those are very conflicting messages that don't bode well that Milan intends to do the right thing here. And that's why I think we should step forward and stop all this activity.
Okay, now the candidates will give a 2-minute closing statement. We will go beginning with Brian, then to John, and then to Adrienne. So 2 minutes, Brian.
Yeah. Good. That works. Thank you for a really invigorating evening. As I expected, I learned so much. I'm awed by the civic involvement of all of our community. What a great turnout for what in other circumstances would just be a normal Tuesday night. We agree on many things up here on the dais. It's great to meet John and great to meet Adrienne, and I'm happy to be standing with them to try and help our community move forward. I do want to assure you that when we do disagree, as your representative, any disagreement will be cordial and businesslike. Does the question belong to the city council? You see it with some of the neighboring communities trying to weigh in on national or state matters. It's tempting, but our business is the business of Orange, not the business of Washington or the business of Sacramento. Is the issue necessary for us to decide as a city council? Are we actually evaluating the decision with the truth? Is our evaluation fair? Is our evaluation process open? Does the discussion and the outcome build our community? Those are the cornerstones of any question that comes in front of me if I'm your representative on the city council. It's been a long night. I appreciate everybody being so focused and following the format, and thank you to Barry and everyone for organizing the event. I look forward to meeting you on the campaign trail. And again, I ask you for your vote. Brian Harrington, City Council, District 6. Thank you.
I think it's you.
Oh, it's me? Okay. Thank you everyone for spending some time to come out here tonight. You all care, and you are here as participating members of your community. I wanted to address one of my yeses that was different than my colleagues. I love this city. I am not anti-development, I'm not pro-developer, but I do think constructive relationships with every member is a positive and a good thing. I've taken a very small amount of money from some builders, developers that have done some great projects in the city, and I think great constructive partnerships can be a really good thing for the city. The majority of the money that I've raised for my campaign is coming from me. I do want to just share what you can expect from me. As your city council member, I will work hard. I will be fully transparent. I will be honest with my positioning. And I will make sure that I continue to be an active learner. I will listen to what everyone has to say and make sure that every voice is heard. The things that I'll stand for is making sure that we invest in public safety for the city of Orange. We preserve our parks and our open spaces. We continue to focus on looking for the financial health of our city for the long term. One thing I will continue to do is always knock on doors. I will always stay connected to what's important, and I will make sure anything that's being discussed, whoever it's impacting, everyone has the opportunity to understand that. I appreciate the time today. Thank you so much. I ask for your vote for John Gyllenhammer, Orange City Council District 6.
Again, thank you, OPA, the Foothill Century, East Orange citizens for hosting tonight's forum. With my 40 years of government and city planning experience, it makes me uniquely qualified to serve on the city council. And as I shared before, being appointed to the Planning Commission Design Review Committee for 11 years really bolsters my ability to hit the ground running. I rely on facts, common sense, and my planning experience with decisions and not politics. I will champion our unique neighborhoods' quality of life and demand an environmentally safe solution for the Sully Miller property and cleanup. I will do what's right for the residents of this district, and it's time for us to have a community-first mindset and prioritize relationships with all of us and City Hall. I'm endorsed by Council Members Ana Gutierrez, Ariana Barrios, Mayor Pro Tem Dan Slater, and I have a question for the voters of District 6. There is a clear contrast on who to vote for in this race. When casting your vote, ask yourself, do you want a council member that is untested or invested? I ask for your vote on November 8th. Go to Adrienne for Orange or GladsonForOrange.com for more information and all the details on my platform. Thank you.
Since it's just Dan and me, we decided to make it a little more informal. Sitting next to Dan here and thanking him for giving up his Tuesday night to come here. We really appreciate it. So we have some questions to ask you, and we'll do like the previous format. I'll tell you how many seconds you have, and you're the first one to go. So, there's nobody else. So let's start off. You have 60 seconds. If you were mayor...
Opening statement?
Oh, that's right. Maybe I should just... Yes. First we have to do the openings. This got a little bit too informal. So Dan will start off with his opening statement, and then we'll get to the questions.
Thank you, Barry. I'm going to stick with what I prepared. Orange is a great city, and my family's been proud to call it home for generations. But we're facing serious problems, and the same tired leadership at City Hall seems uninterested and doesn't want to be bothered. My opponent has been on the City Council 27 years. Let's start with these piles of debris across the street. This site has been an eyesore and public nuisance for decades. It's a disgrace. The very first meeting I was off the council in 2002, the new council, with Mark's support as mayor, voted to overturn their own planning commission and staff recommendation to shut down the asphalt and concrete recycling operation that existed at the time. Although the city has had oversight authority for all these years, the city has simply looked the other way and waited for developers to decide what they want to do here, even allowing it to operate as a completely unregulated and unpermitted disposal site since 2013. Because of the lack of oversight, we have no idea what's in those hills of debris. I feel for all the surrounding residents who've had to put up with this mess for so many years. They've told me of the excessive dust and of medical problems associated with the dust. Today, residents all over the city are fighting inappropriate development projects that are unwanted. High-density housing and a cemetery are being proposed on land-zoned open space along Santiago Creek. The just-killed North Tustin plan proposed over 2,100 more housing units in and around the Orange Mall. Killed only because it's an election year. What's next? City Hall is not leading, they're letting the developers lead. Just follow the campaign donations to see what I'm talking about. Homelessness, crime, and poorly maintained streets are among many other issues. And for fiscal accountability and common sense government, we can and should do much better for the residents and taxpayers of Orange. That's why I'm running for mayor.
Dan, in 60 seconds, tell us, if you were mayor, what changes would you make at City Hall?
Oh my gosh.
60 seconds.
The very first thing I would do is rezone this property to open space. It should have been done many years ago. I would put a homeless task force together to assemble all the parties who helped at Mary's Kitchen. they had this wonderful program going, albeit there were issues there and there were problems that could have been tweaked and fixed. Instead, we didn't need to close the whole operation down, and now the taxpayers are on the hook for it. We need to stop processing developments on land not zoned for it. It's simple. Follow the general plan and initiate strategic planning. Our city has never had a strategic plan put in place. It's about time that we start doing that.
This is a 30-second question, Dan. Orange Park Acres is celebrating 94 years. Would you support a historic designation to protect the rural character of Orange Park Acres? Why? 30 seconds.
Absolutely. For one thing, it would help preserve the equestrian community that we have here, which is under threat. I was on the city council in the 90s when we had the opportunity to make Old Town Orange an historic district. My opponent voted against it, if you could believe that. We need to do the same thing for Orange Park Acres. It would be a great thing.
Another short question, 30 seconds. Are you familiar with, have you read the Orange Park Acres specific plan, East Orange plan, and Santiago Creek Greenbelt plan? Why do these plans matter? 30 seconds.
In all honesty, I've not read them verbatim, but I'm very familiar with what's in them, and we should follow them. The Sully Miller property has been in the Orange Park Acres plan and the East Orange General Plan as open space for many, many years, and the city council keeps trying to change the general plan and rezone the property for the interest of developers.
The mayor currently appoints members of city-sponsored commissions and committees, like the Planning Commission. Is this a best practice? If so, why? If not, what is a better alternative? 60 seconds.
So what we've got currently is a planning commission that is appointees of the mayor, and it's basically a rubber stamp for every single project that comes down the pike in the city. We have a design review committee, so when an applicant goes to them first and they say, you know, your project needs a lot of work, they say, okay, thank you for your time. We're going straight to the planning commission because we know that they're going to appoint or they're going to approve our project. All of the council members after redistricting should have the opportunity to appoint their own nomination to the planning commission. I think the mayor should be able to say A or nay, but we have a stack of people that would like to serve on committees in the city of Orange, and all it happens is political appointees to every committee.
Dan, the city's closure of Mary's Kitchen was controversial and generated a lot of negative feelings toward Orange. Could the city have handled that in a different way? Tell us in 30 seconds.
Absolutely. And as I said, there were problems at Mary's Kitchen. The police department said there were a lot of problems, but we really should have sat down with them and tried harder to make it work, because now we've dismissed a wonderful opportunity and resource that the city had to deal with homelessness, and now we've got to start all over.
In 2019, citizens collected enough signatures to qualify the referendum that would stop the Santiago Creek development. The measure was put on the 2020 ballot entitled Measure AA. Did you support or oppose Measure AA? Why? Did you take a public position on the issue? 90 seconds, Dan.
I was adamantly opposed to Measure AA. In fact, I was one of the ones on the ballot that did a ballot argument against it. I helped gather signatures to oppose it. I was so happy that 63% of the voters throughout the city felt that it should be defeated. Again, this is land that should be open space, and yes, it's as simple as that.
Is there a city council decision over the last few years that you strongly disagreed with, and how would you have handled it differently? Tell us in 90 seconds.
Again, I'm going to move this along, but clearly the Sully Miller approval, I think, was the worst decision. Not only was it poor planning, but the citizenry had to rise up and gather 12,000 signatures to qualify for the ballot. This is a complete waste of time that the citizens should not have to be doing over and over and over. We're getting weary of battling ridiculous decisions being made by this developer decisions, driven decisions made by this city council that should never have happened in the first place.
The short question, Dan, for 30 seconds. Homeowners have an expectation that zoning in their neighborhoods will remain as it was when they purchased their homes. Developers buy land with an expectation that zoning will be changed to support their projects. What is your position on zoning changes? 30 seconds.
Well, big secret, I'm a realtor. You know, my industry loves to develop, and I can't stand that aspect of my industry. I am a big proponent of open space. Overdevelopment and high density ruins neighborhoods. If we protected our zoning, like putting a historic district in place in OPA, we could better fight accessory dwelling units and other threats. We should not be changing zoning.
Okay, Dan, this is a long question, and all we need is 30 seconds. Over the years, Orange Park Acres has established over 25 miles of multi-use trails, which connect to our regional park system with limited financial support from the City of Orange. Currently, the OPA Trail Committee is working on the Community of Orange Loop Trail, COLT for short, which is a 10.5-mile loop trail that would connect the 4 regional parks in East Orange. The vision includes a bridge to safely cross Chapman Avenue. We believe this loop trail enhances the East Orange experience. If you are elected to the mayor's position, what could you do to help us achieve our goals? 30 seconds.
My hat's off to the citizens that have volunteered their time to put this Colt Trail together. I've seen the draft plan, and it is really wonderful. It would be fantastic for East Orange. We just need to, the city did do something right recently and is looking into hiring a grant writer. There's funds out there. We need to go out and ask for them and find them. This trail needs to happen.
Okay, Dan, we're going to the lightning round.
Okay.
You got your paddles, your yes and your no. I'm going to shout 6 questions out. The last 2 require 2 responses. So, question 1. A sitting council member recently stated that Orange survives on development. Do you agree with that? Number 2, will you accept campaign donations from developers and their various lobbyists and consultants? Number 3, city offices are nonpartisan, but most of us do have a party affiliation. Do the goals of your political party influence you when making city decisions?
I'm no party preference, but regardless.
4, would you support a code of conduct for council members and the mayor? 5, residents are concerned about the Chandler site near the corner of Cannon and Santiago Canyon Road. Chandler wants to fill in this area, but hasn't explained why. The site has been reclaimed by nature and is not zoned for houses. Santiago Creek flows through it. Should an environmental impact report be required? Okay, this is the 2-part question, Dan. East Orange residents have been complaining for years about the former Sully Miller site. City Hall has ignored the residents as the mounds grew higher. Finally, in 2020, the county local enforcement agency responded to a citizen complaint and discovered the landowner has been operating an unpermitted disposal site. According to sworn testimony, there are no records of what has been dumped on the site since 2013. So first question, should the city council have used its enforcement authority to stop the illegal activities? And the second part, should Milan, the landowner of the former Sully Miller site, be required to clean up the entire 109-acre site? Okay, thank you. That ends the lightning round. We have one final question, and after that, Dan, you can go into your closing remarks. So 90 seconds
fast.
on this one. 90 seconds on this one. Final question. If you were elected, how would you move the cleanup on the former Sully Miller site forward?
Fortunately, there's a process underway. There's a stipulated agreement that hasn't been finalized yet. It probably could use some tweaking. As Adrienne said, they need to do testing on a larger portion of the site because there's been all kinds of things going on there for so many years, and we don't know what's under those huge piles over there. So we just need to be vigilant because we don't want to inherit a turkey that is going to cost the Orange taxpayers a boatload of money and we're stuck holding the bag.
Okay, Dan, you have 2 minutes for your closing remarks.
Thank you for coming out tonight and for staying. I've worked hard my entire life to achieve what I have today. I put myself through college, and I'm the first member of my family to get a college degree. I've built my own very successful orange business over the last 37 years. I served on the city council 20 years ago. I've been president of the Orange Chamber of Commerce and the Old Town Preservation Association. I continue to serve the community to this day in many ways. I defeated cancer when I was 19 and survived a heart attack and a quadruple bypass 13 years ago. I'm a survivor and a fighter. Put me to work fighting for your interests at City Hall. We all have common interests. We want our hard-earned tax dollars spent efficiently. How much more tax dollars and city staff time are we going to waste pursuing inappropriate developments? And the citizens are weary of fighting them, although successfully with 3 referendums in the last 20 years. We all want a safe city. Just 3 months ago, after 20 years, the city finally added new police positions. The Slater for Mayor campaign is already having an impact as I've been loudly complaining about the lack of police staffing for over a year. But homelessness in Orange is a huge problem, and by the most recent count, we have over 130 homeless people on the streets of Orange. I'm continually dealing with homeless people loitering at my business on Chapman Avenue. We can do better, and I will make this a top priority. We all want good, successful businesses to shop and dine at. We need to better support business growth. I've been campaigning door to door since March, and I've heard your concerns. No matter if you're Republican, Democratic, or no party preference, I'm going to listen to you and represent you at City Hall. Friends know me for my honesty, and I pledge to always be honest and transparent with you. Together, we will preserve and protect our city of Orange.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dan, for coming out tonight. Thank you, all of you. Thank you to the Foothill Century, the Orange Park Acres, and East Orange citizens. Get involved in this election. Don't forget to vote November 8th. Thank you again.